invite Professor Gilson de Oliveira Lima, who is a researcher in rehab program in the Center, University Center Methodist. He coordinates this nucleus that develops experimental activities, and he generates new products and processes that involve critical situations of deficits and lesions. And in some of his publications, we can he has a book, Theories of a Symbiogenic Society. In the first place, good afternoon, good evening. I would like to thank Professor William for having invited our partner here in our network, and also Paulo, and to congratulate all the Fiocruz team due to the quality of this event. And I'm going to try to constitute some metaphors, and I want to show in a demonstrative way some specific results for us to have an interface, and then indicate some code. We have here a metaphor of the 19th century of Nietzsche. We have to see that we need to free the man, free the life of man in his genius, in his tormented genius. And he had big implications in saying that all the perspective of the Illuminism is to center the man, the life in the form of a man, as a principle that has all the measures of everything. It's the humanistic principle. And when I was organizing these slides, by coincidence, Professor Dennett was in Porto Alegre, where I come from, in the south of Brazil, now on Sunday, and I was thinking in him when we were working with this Professor Dennett, and when he told us in informal talks about 120 million Americans still believe that man is a product of intelligent design, a God that can produce from a rib life. And one of the issues that he talks about this, even Darwin, with his brilliant ideas, sometimes is polemic, is that this human design does not exist. When we look at man and monkey, we can see that life is a product between interaction between resources and nature. This is also incredible. And the DNA shows us that we have only, and quote, with all these speeches that we saw, 1% of difference between us and a chimpanzee, for example. This 1% is a lot in the nanometric scale, because DNA is enormous. If we extend this tape in 1.5 meters, we'll see only 15 billion letters make us different from the monkeys. But effectively, we know a lot about life when it occurred in this life on the planet, but we know very little about the passage and structures that generated intelligent life. Recently, they made a statistic work was made that indexed principally the areas that area that evolved very little in the vertebrates in the genome and of human acceleration. And from the point of view to the monkey and man, then it grows a lot. It doesn't have to do with the size of the brain. It has to do with the way of how the brain works, the module of functioning. So the difference between a chicken and a chimpanzee, there are only 2 letters that are different. From the chimpanzee to the modern human, 18 letters, 15% more or less. So it is a dangerous idea that there isn't an intelligent design, and I want to associate this idea with 2 other dangerous ideas. The first one is to break this illuministic approach of the universal man, in the sense of if this universal man who has a status, the rights of the universal rights that passes, that man is not universal and will not even be a human in the rest of his existence. He is a historical product with its mutations and the resources of nature. So this is when we talk about the dangerous idea of Darwin, the notion that the nature now already has story, not anymore the production of culture or the science of the spirit, but nature has a time, temporality. It has a history. So the notion of universal protocols, diagnosis, can sometimes will have to live with probabilities and other kind of equations. Maybe not so open, because the universe is dynamic and it's expanding, always changing. One of the characteristics that were already seen here, the problem of the risks, is that the reductional approach talks about the dimensions of the reality and of the maximum potential of the universe that would be the end of matter, as if it were a product of one only plan, as if everything is resolved when you have to diminish scales and its proprieties, and making things more simpler and because smaller. And in this way, so in this, what we work with is this, that the basic plan of reality is not the only one. The quantum physics showed us, and also the macrophysic effects in astronomical scales. We see that the unification that Galileo and the moderns made, that measured one plan with one reality, maybe was not a real thing. So continuing these metaphors, conceptual metaphors, who knows, we're working of thinking in the possibility of bending of the reality, folding reality, and if that integrates surfaces, it generates interfaces that will permit us to see these this slide, for example, there seem to also have interfaces that are not visible. So we have reality and singular folds with rules that are related with their own ecology and that can bring complex consequences and notions with what is inside and outside of the reality. When we talk about man, we talk about our framework man, our frame as a man. This frame man, in an approach of macrophysics, he lives also with other interactions. We have to use this concept to work with all the interface of man and human. So what sometimes we do, or work we did, was to map a communication that is not accessible, that is fundamentally important inside the communication process. So many communicating interfaces are not words, and so we have many possibilities of communication between machine and brain, for example, in some experiments. And when this communication happens in a semantically scale, this becomes really complicated. Let's carry on. So one of the problems is that when we reduce all the scale in the nanoreality, the macrophysics consequences is that everything passes to be determined. Everything that will be in as if in a chain, and it will not go through the folds of. So I can, with a DNA, program wings, for example, for humans. Can I do this? So this capacity of interference in the nanoscale, in the interfaces, that is integrate this biologically in a biochemical system, is so many things of the DNA that today are being discussed. This is very recent, but is to say that there is the project Genome project that was placed in the
I invested in 100,000 and there were only 25,000, less than a fly. There are interests now. We are doing cloning of cell phones. This mechanic implication from nano to micro and to macro and to macro is what we want to do. First, we want to discuss. It's a strong. This has reduced the treaty and the work about the concept of life to formational computability. In the byte scale or in the nano scale, there is a computable perspective as something that does not exist. Continuing with the barrier of the fold, there is an effect of the fold. One of the main effects is that there is a singularity but a simultaneity. In this moment I'm talking to you, we are operating simultaneously molar behaviors that are visible by the same senses as we, by the eyes and by what we can observe. It is simultaneous. We cannot have access to both at the same time. Unless I reduce the complexity, and if I do that, I have to be aware that I'm doing it. The fuzzy logic is an interesting concept. It is like making the borders become fuzzy. Without that, I cannot do anything for the children with injuries in our research and our research units, because they enable the borders to become fuzzy. That's why we enable us to make interfere. There is the trend, even the strong military trend of the amplification of the human being by means of the machine and the interface of the machine and the knowledge. Knowledge. We are going to make the border be fuzzy to smudge the barrier. Okay. From the plan of the reality and the folds of reality. How do these systemic relations occur? I was very happy because I started talking about nanotechnologies. There were some approaches involving a systemic knowledge. This is a system. I cannot think isolatedly. How it was difficult. It's difficult in disciplinary science. It's difficult to understand the conquest the science has conquered. Now they can only go forward accomplishing these disciplines. The symbiogenesis is the base of our theory in our field. This is the symbio. This is the Smurf of the frontier. The idea is maybe Brazil knows the husband. And our idea is to build families. Of the human body and the brain, effectively. Fiction and science are coming together. There is no separation, antagonic separation, as if science does not produce magic. We're moving across this magic movement. In this specific moment of construction, the border between science and fiction has some singularities, as I mentioned before, but they need to learn mutually from each other. This is how it was on sci-fi during the sci-fi history. This is the metaphor. We're dealing with another. We're not dealing with another species. Our resources are not only binatural interaction, building time with nature, but when technology did some interactions with the world, they start to interfere with this evolution, especially on the viewpoint of species, not intra-species. Why? What happens? The resources will be divided. It's not easy to have access to the resources. I was talking yesterday to a taxi driver who came from Minas Gerais. I'm also originally from there, but I live in the southern Brazil. We were talking about our vice president in Brazil, who I forgot his name, José de Alencar. Well, if he took the 32 surgeries he has been submitted, he could not even have his first agenda. If he would be, of course, if he would be poor, he would be dead. It's glorious, his battle for his life. That's terrific what he's done. But effectively, the access to life in a more complex way by means of knowledge, it's not going to be as easy for other people. There are the haves and the have-nots. And our cousins that are less sophisticated than us, they will not have access to that. These are the three machine families that amplify a symbiose. Since the first bone, we are able to tame stronger animals than me. This muscular amplification is a symbiose, and this muscular symbiose is present in all tools such as pens or any kind of muscular amplification. Sensorious machines will explain us how the brain works when we talk about mirrors and world mirrors. When you look at this screen, you think it's real. If you watch the soap opera and there is some drama, you would be very emotional, although you're watching at pixels, because this symbiose is the sensorious amplification of voice and image, the microphone, of the cell phone, everything. It is just storing information of micro information. There is this control we have acquired in a way to keep signs and to forge significances, meanings. Same thing happens with cognitive machines, which are the machines that started with the fuzzy logic. I think we will resolve the problem of understanding the nanometric universe with such a machine that will be as full of details as computers. The nano is an open system. It will depend on interaction. So each interactive moment, interface of subjectivity of the experience will already alter people that are performing acts and properties. So the complexity level is much larger. This macro economy gives you the capacity to reply the binary logic and the capacity to recover computer information. This is something the brain makes, but doesn't make it very well. The brain is good in many things, but one of the bad things is this informational computability, which is quite bad in our. We don't have the memory of a computer. The computer always keeps everything in memory, not like us. Every time they remind it, they not only remind the times they have been reminded to remind something. They never forget. Computers never forget. They are unable to forget. So how can the computer learn something? The computational machine that goes as fast as 1/millionth part of a second My brain is not like that. My brain is not connected to remembrances. In terms of speed, we can't even compete with the computer. But we can use a hypercortex, which is a memory that is saying everything that is kept on my computer. I don't have to take it on my brain. I just keep it on my computer. I don't have to tell the same stories to remember what I was telling. So now I have mechanisms of amplification, of cognitive amplification. Ecologies, that's an experience of 1997. A cockroach was associated to the nervous system, or they put a chip on its antenna. This cockroach is controlled by remote control. Of course, this cockroach doesn't last very long. Not because somebody's going to step on it, it's because our systems are very reactive to this kind of intervention. Recently, I was working with Nicole Edges in Natal, northeastern Brazil. She's working with machines in a very interesting way with neurons and motors. If you put an electrode in your brain, get prepared because they're going to kill your brain, these chips. Our research is an interdisciplinary unit. I make such a difference sociology that even sociologists are unable to understand me. We work interface in neuro interface with learnings. We also work with children. One of the basic motivations is that the improving concept of humans, especially the Americans' hegemony, is sticking to some knowledge areas, nanotechnology, engineering of information, and cognitive sciences. We want to drive the attention that this kind of improvement, human improvement, has a very small result. We will come to the maximum will come to some machines, but we have to integrate several sectors. Other areas that are strange to us, we work with phonoaudiologists, children that started to work with phonoaudiology, want to learn how to speak correctly. How will they integrate with children who cannot speak well? Have to relate this science with alphabetization. The sound and the meaning of phonemes is not only a clinical problem, it's also a school problem. I have to start a dialogue with the educator or with parents of that child. I cannot stick on my program, and I have to know the implications of the project. This is a case of a 7-year-old boy. He has Paris-Sylvian syndrome. It's a fissure. It's linked to language, and it can understand by resonance. We produced meanings. We understood the language, but we had difficulties in reproducing the motor part of the language, of the speaking ability. The most interesting is that these children could be well served if they come earlier to school, because usually they come to us because they have the challenge to go to school. And they only have to go to school because the law forces them to do that, and we have to face their problem. make it public that you have children with problems and you have to face it. If you identify this since labor, these lesions can be identified easily and the treatment would be much easier because of the symbiotic reactions. We could use our body to do the rehab. It helps us much more than mechanisms from the laboratories. So children with a high plasticity level would be much easier to resolve these situations, but this doesn't happen, unfortunately. We're developing a machine that is nomadic. It will be coupled to the child's arm, and they will emit texts, convert them into voices. I'll show you a little film so you can see the idea of the project. This child has difficulties in running, so it has a self-esteem problem. So they made an ortiz to improve the self-esteem of this child, to make it play with its friends, and this has to do with the machine. We have also a machine that converts texts into voice. This child is playing games and will speed up the learning with its own school knowledge or preschool knowledge. Nobody's communicating with it with drawings and protocols, etc. We're working on this machine with many nanometric components. The interface to the screen is linked to a desktop, which is the feeder of the clinical module that is tagged to the child's arm. This is a second case of a 14-year-old girl. It's a little bit more radical. You can notice that she has deeper injuries, lesions in the cortex, but also in the expression of the speaking ability, the speech. We need another solution for her. We need a sedentary coupling on a wheelchair with infrared light and with the mouse, long distance mouse. I can show you the film. A resonance was made. They said that the brain of this child was normal in the hospital. The movement of the screen is made by the head. It interacts with modules. Alphabetization is also made from there. When I open the door, the mouth, sorry, I do the click. with the Windows interface, to have such an avatar, you need to train a lot. The We are working with some skeletons and doing some clinical works, and field reports. The idea is that wheelchair users should abandon their wheelchairs. One of the most advanced programs in Israel has been copied by the military system for the United States for 2014. People who have lesions from the Iraqi war. What's the exoskeleton? They put this skeleton to the inside part, and so we have this plasticity of our skin interacting with the world. This enables us to have the adventure of living, and going out from your house is already an adventure if you come back alive, because you can put your situation under risk. I will show you a notion of exoskeleton, of amplification, motor amplification, which is a military approach. I know you're arriving at your limits. We just have a couple of films, and then we'll end up. This is a military project of Berkeley. Each one, this is like a supermarket bag. For them. This is an amplification notion, not a deficit notion. It's an important notion because you're seeing some deficit projects of cyborg are forbidden to compete in the Olympic Games or in the regular Olympic Games because the cyborgs work better than humans. Cyborgs. The complexity of this material. Have a look at the mobility. Look what it means to wrap it up. You put this exoskeleton on your body. You can also run a few hundred kilometers faster. This is the microphysical program. All the components are very flexible. This flexibilization is not easy to do. There is an interface. This exoskeleton we're working and analyzing. I'll show you this last film. has three important processes. The first one is to put it on. The largest, the autonomy of this flexibility, this non-dependence is very difficult to develop. I'm having using here. I have this sign. Whole process is mechanic. No silica, and the in the complete mechanic process, it's more complicated, but it's cheaper at the end. If you put the silicon piece, it becomes an exoskeleton of $25,000 or $30,000. The second process is to stand. There is a high dependence in that case. As you can see, these processes are all mapped to be faced in a mechanic way with a silicon ribbon. He's already walking. The most difficult thing is to walk without the walking machine. The balance is the most difficult part of it. It is very difficult. The brain has to learn how to walk with shoulders, because this is what triggers the process. In my case, I have no lesion. I would fall with my nose on the floor. This is like the brain has to relearn it. The clinical part is also essential. Not only in the engineering, the design, energy calculation that is spent in each process. That's it. Okay, to conclude, we have three large scales. The molar, with its singularity, the microphysical, with silicon ribbons, with the fuzzy molar, with the smudge. Like you can see, this gentleman is able to see because this is connected to his synapses. So my previous joke was that we came to a moment where human species is continuing to interfere in nature with its resources. Those who have access to knowledge will be able to alter the path of evolution. This is what we call a symbiotic perspective of an interface of the organic, humid, and with a dry, inorganic interface. The main difference seems to be important. It's not the search for androids in the nanometric scale, but looking for cooperation, symbiotic cooperation in a supramolecular initiative. This is a big advance that will be the huge interaction for the future process. We imagine species that are programmed with a larger duration, and this duration rate will be paid in the pharmacy and will be discussed. So we imagine programs that are capable to keep adult levels, discarding cholesterol after 50 years. Imagine men producing testosterone and women producing estrogen with same intensity at 50, like an adolescent. You can buy inhibitors of free radicals for infections in pharmacy. Imagine the access to these. Imagine the access to those who have no access to all this. There is a combination of complex systems of reference that need to be worked in a disciplinary way. This is my last slide. I can guarantee you, just to drive you the attention and to leave you a final message. In this place I live in the southern Brazil, we were able to make a meeting of science and technology in Brazil to disassemble the logic of discussion groups about microelectronic, micro nanotechnology, biotechnology. With similar groups, we want to work with means and give support to agriculture, urban systems, etc., to make integrations that are super systemic to discussions. You know this. Unfortunately, this didn't work. It was a failure. It's like establishing dialogues among deaf. It's going to be difficult to give larger glimpses. And thank you for your tolerance.